Good. Well, hey, Leo, it's wonderful to meet you, sir. Thank you for taking a minute out today.
Yeah, it's great to chat with you, Joe.
So let me ask you this. 5 years ago, we were figuring this pandemic out. We were about a month in. So many things were going into the unknown. Ultimately, how did you survive that time period, and how has it radiated into your world and what you do today?
Yeah, that was a strange time, huh?
Yeah. Yeah.
I figured it was maybe 2, 3 weeks, long vacation. At the time, I lived in Venice, California, and Los Angeles, and I actually had two brick and mortar businesses. So I had uh, a gift shop, basically, and a breathing studio or a wellness studio, more or less. We did other things, but um, early pandemic, within the first, I want to say 3 weeks or so, all we did was breathing at my studio. Like most of what we did was breathing. And obviously that's, in an airborne virus pandemic, that's not a good business to be in.
Yeah.
Um, but I'd been aware of an air purifying technology that uses ozone and ions and basically like literally neutralizes pathogens in the air, like
Yeah.
kills them dead. So I brought in some of these air purifiers and told my customers, emailed them, said, "Hey guys, we're still here. We're breathing. I've got these air purifiers." I got so much hate from people were just in such fear. It was wild.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean that led to the demise of both of those businesses. I think I held on for maybe 5, 6 months. I held on to my lease, kept paying rent,
Wow.
and yeah, eventually I had to close those businesses. That was, it took a bit of time, but that was kind of a parlay into breathing tech, more or less.
Yeah.
So I shifted obviously into the virtual space, as did most people, and started developing breathing tech, more or less, that people could do from anywhere in the world. The thing that I miss so much and what I love so much, getting people together to lie down and breathe rhythmically for an extended period of time is one of the coolest things I've experienced, if I'm honest. It's like church for the rest of us, more or less.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing. I picked up a book a couple of years ago. I love audiobooks, and it was just talking about breath work. And I just never absorbed how important it is, the way you breathe and the way you take in air and the way it really will rejuvenate and affect your entire physical existence, which obviously affects your emotional and psychological everything. It's
Oh
it's
yeah.
just amazing and people don't realize it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so
Yeah.
true. It's
Yeah.
right under our nose,
Yeah.
pun intended.
Yes.
But no, it's true because the breath is it's said that the breath is the only function of the autonomic nervous system that we both consciously and unconsciously control. I mean, you could argue that like emotions and thought patterns do the same thing, but breath is such a direct and immediate, it's basically like a lever on the nervous system.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, and obviously, the breath controls the nervous system. The nervous system controls the body and the mind
Yeah.
and the endocrine system. So
I remember the first time I listened to a meditation tape. I remember the orator was kind of like, take in the breath and imagine it going down your windpipe and landing in your stomach, and just that visual constructing that world, like listening to an audiobook, was like, wow, it was just wild. And even with meditation, as much as people do it, and it's kind of the key thing of health right now, it's all about breath. It's all about breathing and getting yourself into that place.
it's so true. It's so true. And there's, the way that I see it, and this maybe I'm preempting a question. I don't know. It's been a big curiosity for me. Has been if breathing in the setting of what's popularly known as breath work. I don't like to call it breath work. I generally call it active breathing, or just breathing. But if breathing in a setting like that is so potent and so powerful, and we see people weeping and they forgave their mother in a session, or they came up with the idea for their book, their book name, or they realize they need to leave their partner, like divorce their spouse, the things that can come up in these settings
Yeah.
is just so extraordinary
Yeah.
and really kind of takes you by surprise consistently.
Yeah.
But we always wondered, like me and the teachers would always be asking, like, if breath is so powerful in this setting, what about everyday breathing, the rest of our life?
Yeah.
And so I kind of see it as like there's two different kind of ways of using the breath. One is that deep therapeutic stuff that we did at my studio, and the other is um, breath awareness, really. So like there's a healthy way to breathe, and that is deep, slow, and through the nose. So basically into your belly, and there's many reasons for this. Nasal nitric oxide. Have you heard of this?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So this, I mean, this is fascinating. The guys who uh, discovered the essentially the prevalence of nitric oxide in the human body,
Yeah.
they end up winning a Nobel Prize for their research. It was like, decades of research. And there are two ways that we essentially get nitric oxide in the body. One is through nasal breathing, and the other is through green leafy vegetables.
Yeah.
And this nitric oxide is like, I think they called it like molecule of the year back in the late 90s when it was first really understood. It the researchers had a more difficult time finding functions of the human organism that were not either facilitated or co-facilitated by nitric oxide than those that were.
Yeah.
So it's this and it's almost like this fairy dust stuff. So like when we're breathing into our nose, we get we get this nitric oxide released in our mucous membrane,
Yeah.
and it has a shelf life of like under 2.5 seconds or something. So just poof and gone.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah,
It's
it's pretty
wild.
fascinating.
It is
Yeah.
fascinating. So, if we broke down what you do right now in 2025, put you in front of a bunch of fifth graders at career day, kid in the back of the room is like, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" How do you answer that child?
That's a really hard question. It gets it gets I'm sure you're familiar with this because you seem like a Renaissance man yourself, but it seems to get harder with every passing year, to be honest.
Yeah.
I've definitely shifted into technology, and that was a bit of a force shift. I've always been a designer, space designer. I build, design build venues and products. I would say the way I would answer that would be closer to what's my mission than what do I actually do? Because I'll do whatever I need to do to fulfill that mission.
Yeah.
For me, it's empowering the hero of a thousand faces. Have you heard that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Joseph Campbell's Hero of a Thousand
Ah,
Faces. So the
man.
hero,
Yeah, I love
yeah,
Joseph Campbell. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah.
So the hero within each and every one of us. And for me, creativity, essentially, we're all creators. We're all artists of our lives. It could be our families. It could be the meal that we're cooking. It could be our careers,
Yeah.
a book, everything. We're creators. We're all artists. And that to me is one of the hallmarks of universal spirituality, creativity. And so for me, the breath is so essential. I am a mystic, and I'm very like oriented towards the ineffable, the mystery. But the breath has this very useful use case for clearing out or peeling the onion of what we are not.
Yeah.
And that's typically like clumped up in fear. So for me, the reason I love the breath so much is that it has a tendency by engaging the parasympathetic nervous system and a bunch of other really cool scientific things. It kind of sloughs off what we're not.
Yeah.
So we become more of who we are. We have more access to more of our cognitive resources, and we're more present.
Yeah.
Whether you're using breath awareness, literally just being aware of your breath without manipulating it, which brings you into the moment. Eckhart Tolle talks about this quite a bit. Or doing therapeutic breath practices, you're gaining more access to more of yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny you bring up Joseph Campbell. I was just listening to audio tapes that he did with Bill Moyers, and
Yeah.
it's just
Oh, those
astonishing.
are great.
Oh
Yeah.
man. the depth of that man and how good he makes you feel. Like sometimes when you get into certain levels of spirituality and philosophy, it can be like, oh my God, it's so dark. It's like so Nietzsche. But when you get to
Yeah.
like Campbell, you feel this just absolute, you feel like you fit in the world. You feel like you fit on the timeline of where we are
Yeah.
evolution wise, and that you can immediately grasp that we're already doing things. Like at one point, he said, if you genuinely feel for your family and friends and your kids and all of these things, you're already meditating. You're already in a meditative state. If that's something that you want to protect. So there's all of those revelatory things. I'm so glad you brought them up because I've just been on
Mm-hmm.
this Campbell kick lately. There's just something about
Yes.
in this modern era of fear and weirdness going on in America in 2025, all of those deep levels of wisdom just kind of erode this plasticity and silliness that we're living and seeing right now. So he's the antidote
Yeah.
for me, you know?
Oh man, I feel that. You know, we are, and it's somewhat of a hallmark of postmodern kind of psychology, if you will, which is now kind of like becoming the main psychology. It's like enough of us have moved from modern into postmodern that it's no longer fringe, more or less,
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
be pluralistic and believe in equal rights and environmentalism and all these things, which are hallmarks of postmodernism. But there's also in that radical pluralism, there's also kind of a loss of meaning.
Yeah.
There's no like, this is the way. If everything is the way, if every way is the way, we lose a bit of like coherence.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think I agree with you completely. Joseph Campbell does such a beautiful job, and he was, 30, 40, 50 years ahead of his time, really. I'm so glad that he kind of went mainstream.
Yeah.
But we're definitely in a meaning crisis,
Yeah,
and
we
that's
are.
something that I'm writing about quite a bit in this book that I'm working on now called The New Creator:
Yeah.
Rise of the Mindful Artist in the New Meaning Economy.
Interesting.
And so, yeah, it ties a lot to Joseph Campbell's ideas and models, but it's the idea that, I mean, and it really kind of like parallels what's going on with technology and AI, where we're like all of the doing is being taken away from us.
Huh?
And so, if all the doing is being taken away from us, we're, it seems we're moving into a direction of becoming human beings, really.
Yeah.
And if we're human beings, it's things like soft skills and purpose, vision, mission, values
Yeah.
that are going to become the skills of the future.
That's interesting. That's totally true. So I'm curious, when you were a kid, when you were the fifth grade, what did you want to be when you grew up? What was your dream?
Oh my gosh, probably a fireman, really. And you know what?
I
Actually,
get
I
it.
think I wanted to be a pilot. I wanted to be a pilot because my dad was a pilot.
Okay. Okay. So
Yeah.
how did this happen? Take me back to where you were born and raised. What were the foundational seeds of being an entrepreneur, of being cognizant of health, all of these things that have evolved into who you are today?
I mean, that's a long story, but I was I was born and raised in Alaska. Had a lot of really kind of like intense experiences with nature,
Yeah.
and including, my dad and I were chased by a grizzly, almost went down in a plane crash, um, really intense conditions, right? So from an early age, I was very aware of the fragility of life in a way.
Yeah.
Like at any moment, something could happen, which, for my nervous system wasn't such a good thing.
Right.
But there's definitely like a hypervigilance that I'm still working through at 42 years old. But that led to, um, for whatever reason, I had a kind of an industrious, adventurous, go-getter mentality. It was just, I think it was just kind of in me. Um, and so I was kind of, my first business was a lawn mowing service, and I was 12 and I had an employee. I had a marketing campaign and an employee, and that kind of just led one thing to another. And when I was in my mid 20s, a couple of years, at about 23, I funded a small startup and did real well kind of right out of the gate. And me and the primary founder of that business, we were leaving a nightclub one day with a big group of friends. We were doing really well. We were young and we were making lots of money, kind of felt like we were kings of the world. And he looked at me and said, we should open he's Albanian. He said, we should open a spot of our own. And I was like, yeah, yeah, we should. And 2 years later, or maybe 18 months later, we opened a venue in Denver, Colorado, and it was very successful and won a bunch of awards. And I had an award-winning chef, and then about 2 years into that, and that was kind of my main gig for those 2 years. About 2 years into that, I was visiting my father in Alaska, just kind of taking a break from things, and taking a shower at about 6:30 in the morning. I slipped into an altered state. At the time, I was totally unfamiliar with psychedelics. I had no kind of spiritual practice in place. I wasn't really doing anything that I can see in retrospect would have opened a door for this experience. But I slipped into an altered state, and I was looking through my eyes, but it felt like I describe it now as what I think is classically known as non-duality.
Yeah.
I didn't have any thoughts in my head. If I didn't have any thoughts in my head, this is me making sense of it, then I don't have a sense of location.
Yeah.
So I didn't have an I. Uh, I didn't have a sense of I. My sense of self was permeating my perception. So it went as far as my perception went, beyond the walls of the bathroom, beyond the walls of the house, beyond the stratosphere of the earth.
Yeah.
And that experience really shook my core and led me on a path of going very deep into philosophy and mysticism and kind of like revisiting the teachings of the great kind of masters and teachers throughout history,
Yeah.
going, wow, they were talking about something real.
Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing. So, who's been kind of a heroic force for you? Who's been an inspiration for you to do all of this in your life?
My father's probably my primary hero
Yeah.
and wise man. But there are, I would say, like off the top of my head, two people that have probably influenced me in massive ways. One kind of in the area of philosophy, and that's Ken Wilber. Are you
Yes.
familiar with integral theory?
I've heard the name before.
Yep. So Ken's been a big influence, and I ended up, you know, spending a lot of time with Ken. Actually, I got kind of pulled into his life, and so I I've spent a lot of time with him, kind of taking it in. He has integral theory, so his life's work is known as integral theory, and it's basically a theory of everything. Most people would probably recognize his face if they saw
Yeah.
him. He looks bald, alien, smart guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, so he's in fact he's one of the philosophers in the Matrix Philosopher's Notes. Like if you
Okay.
watch the DVD,
Yeah.
yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
The Wachowski brothers, I know that they're sisters now, I guess, but they Ken's a teacher of theirs. He's influenced presidents. Deepak Chopra and Anthony Robbins call Ken a teacher. So he's this kind of mega mind with this mega model
Yeah.
that makes sense of
Yeah.
so much paradox
Yeah.
and can be applied to any domain,
Yeah.
literally any action, any philosophy, any product, any brand, any even a conversation. Like you could say the conversation that you and I are having right now, because of both of our consciousness, both of our psychology, we're both in spiral dynamics. We're clearly, I can sense from you already in this integral, this emergent stage of consciousness, of
Yeah.
psychology. So Ken's been a huge influence. I basically spent the last 15 years applying his integral theory to everything I do in design and creativity and business. And then the other hero that, you know, isn't so philosophical, but is definitely values driven and very mission driven is Peter Diamandis.
Okay.
Are you familiar with
No.
Peter?
Uh-uh.
He is, in my opinion, he is the most heroic entrepreneur alive.
Okay.
He founded something called the X Prize, maybe 15 years ago, um, where he takes basically philanthropic money, and they've got like, I want to say it's like 8 or 10. I'll have to look this up because I was telling someone the other day, but they've identified a number of sectors, uh, like science and medicine and healthcare and space exploration and the environment, et cetera, And what they do is they raise like hundreds of millions, tens, hundreds of millions of dollars, and they put a prize on a problem. So they'll be like, whoever, we don't care who you are, if you can solve this problem, you'll get $10 million. Dollars.
Yeah.
And so he's like, he's very like, essentially he's like saving mankind from ourselves by incentivizing innovation
Yeah.
and just wide open, just anyone can hop on.
That's interesting. It almost reminds me, Mr. Beast, but he's doing like contests and whatnot. But he always, I've heard him in an interview where he dumps all that money back in. Sounds like that's
Hmm.
what he's doing, but he's doing it
Hmm.
in that more philanthropic way of like what Bill Gates is doing by eradicating issues in Africa and around the world health wise. It just
Sure.
seems like
Sure.
it's definitely going to benefit humanity. That's
Sure.
interesting. I need to look into him more. That's fascinating.
Yeah, and he's friends with some of the sharpest folks on the planet as
Yeah,
far as technology and longevity. Uh, Pretty much all of the sectors of technology. He's very tech driven, but he founded the Singularity University with Ray Kurzweil.
yeah.
Um, just a fascinating guy.
Yeah, I need to look into it. So I'm curious, after all of these geographical and career jumps that you've been through, and just emotionally and overall, what are you ultimately the proudest of?
Probably who I'm becoming in the process.
Yeah,
And it has not been easy. In fact, lately, I've just gone through another big cycle, with COVID, but there were a number of other things that led me to this is the second breathing app that I built.
yeah,
And, it's been a lot of challenge, total pivot, very challenging financially and psychologically on so many levels. Um, but who I'm becoming in the process, it's not every day I feel this way, but that battle bronze and scarred, hero within me
yeah,
that is becoming more and more like himself with each passing day.
yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
dig it. So let's take that a bit further. Everyone has a perception of you. Family, friends, clients, everyone that gets immersed in your world, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Oh my gosh. This question, that question's, boy, that's a good question. You know, I think this is the challenge of being so deeply in the space of mysticism and philosophy and having had experiences, in sober states that were so profound. I think I am the universe. I think I am um, nothing and everything. And so the personality construct is a curious is a curious thing
Yeah.
because that changes every day,
Uh-huh.
right?
Yep.
And every moment of every day.
Sure. Yeah.
And there's, at any given time, there's 16 to 45 sub personalities trying to talk at once.
Yep. Yep.
So who I am is, somebody who, in my life, like if you were to look back at, I've archived a bunch of stuff on Instagram, but if you were to look back at the last 15 years of me, um, it's been a wild ride. I'm always changing.
Yeah.
So
And hallelujah for that. That's the way I look at it. It's that I mean we aren't here long enough, and we should go through our incarnations of caterpillar to butterfly and back again, and let the phoenix fly, so to speak.
absolutely. 100%, brother. I
Yeah.
appreciate that.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm with
totally.
you.
Yeah, I know that's been my life. So you
Yeah.
got a lot going on. If anybody wants to get involved with the words, the technology, all of the good work you're doing, where's the best place to go?
Probably the best place would be leomars.com with two R's. I've got kind of all my work there. I've been writing a lot. In fact, I'm sharing a lot of what I'm writing in my book with my email subscribers, so they wanted to get on that list. Typically, every Saturday I send an email. It's very focused on value and insight, inspiration for the new creator.
Yeah,
So that's probably the best spot.
cool. Leo, this has been great, man. Thank you so much. Sometimes you don't know what you're walking into, but I appreciate the depth. I appreciate you opening up, what you're doing. It's been great to kind of swim in this world for a little while.
Absolutely a pleasure, Joe. I'll
Yeah.
come back on any time. It's great
Yeah.
chatting with you.
Dude, let's do it. Yeah. Hello, friends. Joe Dimino here. I just wanted to let you know that after 30 years or so, I have finally released my first book of poetry through the mighty Spartan Press here in Kansas City, Missouri. As the creator and host of both Neon Jazz Radio and the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino podcast, along with being a visual artist, I'm ready to embark on a new adventure and want you to be a part of it. You can get a copy online via Barnes & Noble, Amazon, and actually on the streets in Kansas City at the great Prospero's bookstore off 39th Street. You can also visit joedimino.com for links to the book, to more poetry, and everything in my world, including paintings. Thanks for all of the love and support over the years, and please dig the words.